Hello, my name is Oskar Gonzalez. I'm one of the founding coordinators for the Texas chapter. These days I don't really do coordination. I try to focus more on developing lectures and hopefully getting a lecture team going for the chapter as well as for the movement. Here are two lectures condensed into one shorter one. That I presented for Z-Day 2011 in Austin, Texas. And my objectives for this little, low quality video is to pitch my ideas that I have for transitioning into a resource-based economy and the Venus Project, and also looking for collaboration for making a better, more improved pitch or sort of to the general public, and also to inspire other people to make videos and develop original content for the Zeitgeist movement. What I'm working with here is a sort of a condensed version of two lectures entitled Arriving at Solutions, Significance, Implications, and Process. And the other one is Solutions I Have Arrived At, putting the second lecture into process, why I advocate a resource-based economy, and what I propose to implement it. Ultimately, I want to tell you about my ideas for the transition, which is nothing more than the solutions that I arrived at with the information available to me. But before I get into that, I have to explain what the concept of arriving at solutions really means for any of this to really make sense. During my time as a coordinator for the Texas chapter, I've met a lot of people and answered a lot of emails, and they have a variety of questions, sort of like, I don't know what to do, I wish somebody would tell me what to do, or I wish someone would just tell me what not to buy, what to buy. How are we going to get into a transition, or how do we transition to the resource-based economy or the Venus Project? And my favorite question of all, when are we going to do something? So at first, my first response to any question is, you tell me. Because I want you to understand what has to be done instead of me just outright telling you what needs to be done, because you won't appreciate the answer as well as if you came to that conclusion or answer. So I like the saying, truth cannot be told, it must be realized. I find it to be not very effective to just outright tell people my solutions and my explanations without detailing the thought process that I use to arrive at that solution. Just imagine a couple of people are discussing what's wrong with society and what are we going to do about it. And out of nowhere, a third person comes out and says, hey, we need circular cities with cybernetic systems, and go on and on. People are going to think that third person is some cultist or some weirdo because the solutions that the idea is being presented is out of context, and you're just not going to understand. So with any explanation without the thought process or how you arrived at them is just going to be met with disagreement or just going to confuse people because you don't understand, you didn't explain how you arrived at such conclusions. That's pretty much what I'm doing here with this presentation. Is I don't want to outright tell you my ideas for the transition without explaining the thought process they went into it. Also, if I just tell you what to do, and you listen to me thinking, man, this guy sounds good, but I didn't explain how I arrived there, I may be wrong, and no one's really going to understand or challenge the idea, and we'll just be wrong together. So, and thirdly, if I didn't tell you how I got there, you can come up with any reason of where I came up with this. Oh, he pulled it out of his rear or whatever. Anything cynical like that. So it's important to explain how you arrived at your solutions as much as it's important to explain the solutions themselves. When sharing solutions or conclusions that we arrived at, we're going to be met with disagreement. No. What we need to do to transition to a resource-based economy is yada, yada, yada. Right? Everybody's got an opinion and everybody's right. How is that possible? It's just amazing that we are always right. Well, naturally, working with the best information we have to work with, the conclusion that we hold or the position that we hold is the best one, or else we wouldn't hold that position. So this is how we're always right. Understanding how we arrived at solutions or conclusions or positions will help us with any hopes at resolving this disagreement. So I was trying to think of a way of how is it that we arrive at solutions, and the thing that came to mind is, well, how do we arrive at mathematical solutions? And this is where I came up with the math equation analogy. You and I are solving a math problem with our calculators. We separately enter our inputs into the calculators and hit enter. Comparing our answers, we find that they're different. If the calculators are functioning correctly, how can this be explained? So this is the way I resolve disagreement with technically being right. Well, we enter our inputs, you enter separate things, I enter separate things, we hit enter on the calculators, and technically what's on the calculator is right. Now, they're in disagreement because we view the problem differently, or we understand the inputs relationships to each other differently, and this affects our solutions. Continuing with the math equation analogy, when we investigate how we arrive at mathematical solutions, it becomes straightforward on the relationship of inputs to solution. If we have different inputs, it changes the solutions. For example, 1 divided by 4 is 0.25. We substitute the 1 for a 0, and we have 0 over 4 equals 0. Straightforward stuff. But what I want to point out here now is that even though we have the same values, the same mathematical operation, changing the relationship of these also affects the solution. So 0 over 4 is 0, but 4 over 0 is undefined. Keeping this analogy in mind will help us resolve disagreements. It is our ideas that are in conflict, not each other. So keep that understanding and keep respect. Inputs and the relationship should be questioned, not the logic or thought process. If we can keep that in mind, we can perhaps modify or reach some resolution on the sources of information that you're using, and you might have a shot at reaching some resolution for your disagreements, instead of just outright insulting that you can't come to the right conclusion with good data. But also keep in mind that modifying solutions is impossible without correcting the math from which it was arrived. Okay, so putting this math equation analogy into practice, here's the example of the order of inputs affects the solutions. One of the common arguments I hear against the Venus Project is the whole money incentive problem. And it goes something like this. Money creates incentive, which allows us to get things done, or affects our productivity. If there is no money, then we have no incentive, and nobody will do anything, and man will lie down in the sun all day in the sun, as Jacques Fresco puts it. Well, if that's the mathematical setup, then you are absolutely right, because you just spelled it out for me. Yes, if money creates incentive and there's no money, well, how can there be incentive? So I don't argue that you're wrong on your outcome. I just question the relationship between money and incentive. What if we look at it in a different order of operations? What if we always have incentive, and what your incentive is and my incentive varies, and it differs. So if your incentive is money, then if there's money to be made, something will get done about it. If there is no money or profit to be made, nothing will ever get addressed with that issue. And we see this all the time in society. If you can make a buck off of it, people are all about it. If there's like an issue like the homeless, there's no money to be made, nothing really gets done about it. So, what if our incentive, which we have all the time, is to improve the human condition in some way? Well, if it brings about happiness or progress to the human condition, those issues will get addressed. And if there's no human improvement, why even bother with it? So I like that that alternative perspective of the whole money or incentive and money relationship. So I don't challenge people's conclusion that money creates incentive equals productivity. That's one way to look at it. I just offer a different relationship of the same inputs that we're working with: money, incentive, productivity. They just work differently. So this is how we can address order of operations disagreements. Another thing we have to consider when we're explaining how we arrive at our conclusions or solutions is that we need to qualify our terms. Someone, 200 or 300 years ago would probably say that humans can't fly. And how would they arrive at this conclusion? Well, they could observe birds in flight, and they see that, birds have wings, and they have feathers, and they flap real fast, and they take off and fly. So if you use that information alone, then you can say that humans can't fly, or they will never fly. And technically they're right, but the way they didn't qualify their terms, so that's why it's incorrect. If you had said under the conditions of feathers, wings, and flapping alone, man cannot fly, and then you're technically right. Yes, okay, that's better put, and it's true. We can't flap our wings and fly because somehow intuitively we know that we're too heavy for flapping wings. So, and even true today, we ride on machines that fly. We don't directly fly, we indirectly fly. But explaining the whole concept of lift, weight, thrust, and drag, and followed by a real-life example of showing them, it's difficult not to agree that flight is possible today. So, just consider this whenever we're explaining the solutions we arrived at, that you have to really qualify your terms, or we're just going to be debating over and over again and not really reaching any resolution there. So to resolve disagreement, we have to qualify our terms. Arriving at solutions and resolving disagreements on the solutions we arrived at, we understand that we have to qualify our terms to understand each other. We understand that changing the order of operations of what we're working with, the relationship they have to each other, will vary our solutions. But I would say the majority of our disagreements comes from varying input. And some examples of how our input varies comes from our environment, personal experience, or just missing information. So in the example of racism, the environment input, let's say a person is grown up around a KKK clan, and that's all he knows and hears, and this person, is just brought up a certain way, and through his environment, this is all he knows, and he believes that the outcome the position he holds is the true one. His race is superior to all. I don't know what they believe, but just imagine this person goes around town, going shopping at Walmart in his KKK outfit, and he gets jumped by a bunch of people, and it just reinforces his position. It's like, there you go. Here's some examples of why I'm right. And you have to understand that your inputs from your environment may be true and supportive of whatever position that you hold, but you have to understand that your environment varies from everybody else's environment. Like what you believe here as, someone raised in some Judeo-Christian Western societies probably doesn't feel the same way in another part of the world. So you have to understand and respect that your environment is sort of like a microcosm and unique to you, and your input from your environment is going to vary from other people. In the case of personal experience, I've met some people who are really into the whole capitalism and stuff, and they tend to be really hard workers, and they view the world as divided between hard-working people and lazy people, and they're basing this off of their personal experience. That they worked hard for what they have, and they earned the right to enjoy a good life, and there's other people around them and that they've witnessed who are lazy and just using the system to get by, and therefore that justifies stratification of society or something like that. And you have to understand that when you have input from your personal experience, that it's a very biased experience. It doesn't have an outsider's perspective, and what you see and what you experience kind of gets filtered through your own psychological biases. So you understand that your personal experience may vary from another person's experience under different conditions. So you can't draw from personal experience alone. And last is the homeless situation. I use an example of myself here. Before I went to college, I used to call it as I see it. You know, I see homeless people out there, and they're dirty and they're lazy and whatnot. You know, and calling it as I see it, you know, isn't enough to reach a well-rounded solution or outcome or position, because just because what you see doesn't mean that's all there is to see. What about the missing information that you don't observe? Calling it as you see it isn't enough. You know, like the statistics of homelessness and schizophrenia. You know, a lot of these people are schizophrenics, and they're runaways or abandoned from their families, and you can't observe that. There's no way to account for missing information. So you always understand that that right there, I think, is a big portion of why people's inputs vary. And this is how we get to varying solutions whenever we're arriving at our solutions, and why we have disagreement is that a lot of us are missing information on various topics. With the Zeitgeist movement, we really promote the idea of arriving at solutions. And there's going to be topics from time to time that it seems like we cannot arrive at a unified solution. And what do we do about that? Let's understand what it is, what's happening whenever we enter these endless debates or these seems like no-end conversations or arguments. Make sure that you're discussing the same topic. I don't mean to oversimplify, but it seems to me that the abortion debate are two different topics. One is talking about how abortion is immoral, and the other counter argument is that isn't that abortion's not immoral, or it is moral, but in fact, should it be legal or not? And those are two different topics, and you're going to have to at least argue the same topic if you're going to reach any resolution. You're going to go on and on if you're talking about two different things. Again, not to oversimplify, but just a quick example. Also, whenever we get to these problems that we just can't resolve, maybe you're just asking the wrong questions. One of the things that I was trained as a scientist is to ask better questions if you just cannot reach any kind of an answer. One of the examples I like to use on that is the whole chicken or the egg argument, whereas which came first, the chicken or the egg? And if you set up the question like that, you're never going to reach an answer to that, because the whole question is designed to be discussed indefinitely. We're talking about chickens and chickens here. You know, you're talking like the egg and the chicken are two different entities. They're both chickens. And a more appropriate question that you might actually answer is, did chickens always have shells? And if there's a yes or no to that, you can go investigate when exactly did this happen or not happen. So that's a better question that you could actually resolve instead of what came first. Another example would be like the whole nature versus nurture. Well, if you have to pick one, you're never going to get there. You have to understand the relationship of nature and nurture if you're going to resolve anything. One example that's mentioned by Peter Joseph and John Fresco is, I really liked how they say we're talking at each other instead of to each other. We have to hope that we're understood, and I think that's a really good point, and that goes with the whole defining your terms and your inputs and stuff. Okay, here is just a quick slide to help you at arriving at your solutions. Is you really have to understand your components. When my daughter was about 4 or 5 years old, I told her to go clean her room, and she went out there and she came back and she's like, I don't know how. And you know, so I go over there with her, and I stood at the doorway and I looked at her messy room, and I was like, wow, I don't even know how to clean your room. You know, what are we going to do about this? So as tasks as a whole can be overwhelming, but if we understand the components, it'll help us arrive at our solutions. It becomes clear what has to be done. Like, no matter what happens to your dirty room, the book's got to go on the shelves. No matter what, the bed has got to be made eventually. I don't know how to clean your room, but I know those things have to be done. You got to put the toys in the bin, and sure enough, we cleaned the room in like 15 minutes. And so you have to understand the components. If you don't understand the components, it makes it like a really overwhelming task to try to resolve anything. Okay, so here's the good part, the solutions I arrived at. This was a part of the third lecture that I presented on Z-Day 2011 in Austin, Texas. It was really long and epic, and I was very, very proud of it. But for the sort of objectives of this video, which is just to pitch the idea of arriving at solutions, how to do that, and some possible ideas for a transition, I'm just going to present on what's relevant to the transition. Okay, so keeping the math equation analogy in mind, we really have to define our terms if we're going to arrive at a solution together. We have to understand what it is we're trying to change if it's going to be clear to us what has to be done in order to change it. So here I want to talk about what the monetary system is, and to do so we have to investigate what an emergent property is. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When I think of air, I think of gas molecules just bouncing off each other in a chaotic fashion, and I need it to breathe, and it's just not much more impressive than that. It just sits there and does nothing. However, we get air, and we move it in a certain direction, and we observe some new effects of air. It's not just something you breathe, and it's not something you're in, but it's something you can feel and something you can observe the effects on whenever it blows something away or something. You put these same gas molecules in an even higher order of structure, such as a tornado, and it has some very, very real effects. It becomes its own entity. It's a very scary entity, very powerful, and if I saw one coming at me, I would be running away with my arms flailing, and it's very real. But it's just air. I don't run away from air, but I will run away from a tornado, even though it's essentially just air. So this higher level, this higher order of complexity that we see with the gas molecules is an emergent property. An emergent property is a higher level of complexity of something, and that we can observe its effects, and it only exists when it's in function. Another example of an emergent property would be me. I am much more than the sum of my parts. I am the end result of everything in my body functioning correctly, or sometimes not functioning correctly, and I interact with my environment, and this is what makes me who I am. Because right now, you're probably sitting at your computer listening to your computer. You're not really interacting with your computer, you're interacting with a recording of who I am. And what am I? Am I just like the hair follicles in my body, in my hands, my circulatory system? What is it that makes me me? It's everything functioning correctly that results in who I am. For example, if I'm talking to you right now and somebody comes behind me with a big cinder block and hits me over the head with a real blunt object, and I am instantly dead on impact. But every cell in my body didn't die on impact. In fact, if you hit me with a blunt enough object hard enough, every cell would be intact in my brain, in my skull. It's just rearranged in a non-functioning fashion. But the skin between my toes is still alive. All my organs are probably still alive for a few minutes, but I am instantly dead. So this is the example of me being an emergent property. I only exist, and you can only interact with this sort of emergent property when everything functions correctly. Okay, we get it. We know what a tornado is. It's emergent property. We know what you are, Oscar. You're an emergent property. We can hear you, see you, whatever, shake your hand. But let's move this concept of an emergent property to something a little more abstract, like the U.S. government. What is the U.S. government? Can you see it? Can you taste it? Can you touch it? You know, you can't. It's an abstraction. It's an idea. It's an emergent property. What the U.S. government is just a bunch of people showing up to work and doing their jobs. It's a set of laws and regulations and a way of doing things. It's a bunch of property, some tangible material that's claimed in the idea of something abstract. It's a network of people working together. It's a symbol. So all these things is the U.S. government. It's an abstract idea. It's an emergent property. But the effects of this emergent property are very, very real. The U.S. government affects the whole globe. Everybody can see the effects and witness the effects of the government, just like you could in a tornado, or you can interact with me. But it's just an emergent property, and it only exists when the government functions. If people stop going to work, or networks fail, or people disregard the Constitution and its laws, the U.S. government no longer exists. Now, I'm not promoting anarchy or anything. I'm just explaining the concept of an emergent property exists only when it functions. So discussing emergent properties brings me back to my original idea of the monetary system. What is it? It is an emergent property. It's a system of doing things, and it only exists if it functions, just like all other emergent properties. And we decide on how long we play, like the whole analogy of a baseball game. A baseball game is an emergent property. It's a bunch of people showing up on a field with a bat, gloves, or whatever, and they decide to play by the rules. But what if by the fifth inning everybody gets hungry and decides to just call it a day and go home? What happens to the baseball game? Well, the baseball game no longer exists. It's an emergent property, and it only exists when it's functioning. So this is what I'm proposing with the monetary-based economy. It's just an emergent property, and we decide on how long we play. This brings me, to that wonderful quote of Bill Hicks. Life is just a ride, and we can change it at any time. There's no savings of money. It's just a choice. And this is what I'm getting at by defining what the monetary-based economy is. It's just an emergent property, and it only exists if we decide on perpetuating it. Well, Oscar, that sounds great, but that's not really much of a plan. It just feels good. Yeah, I know. I'm getting there. So understanding that an emergent property exists only when it functions, how do we disrupt function? And this brings me to the example of cancer. I don't want to compare the zeitgeist movement to cancer, but you have to understand my bias. I was trained as a cancer biologist, so I think of terms of cancer and biology and make these analogies quite frequently. Now, the way cancer disrupts function, or ends a life, sadly, is that it becomes malignant, and it starts to spread all over the body, and it metastasizes into certain locations, and it starts to grow there, and it disrupts function of that organ. You have some cells that move from your lungs to your bone marrow, and it affects your immunity, or it moves into your brain and disrupts function. You go into coma, or you have seizures, or something tragic. Or it goes into your liver, and your body can't exist without a liver, so therefore you die. So you understand that cancer disrupts function. It doesn't convert every cell into malignancy. It just penetrates every viable system of the organism and disrupts function, and that's how it terminates that life. So now I know that's pretty dark and wicked stuff, but I'm trying to make a point here that with the zeitgeist movement, we don't have to convert everybody to get along with the idea of a resource-based economy. We just need to convert enough people in the right places to disrupt function, and the monetary system will no longer exist. So let's get into more details of this. Alright, the transition. Oh my goodness. You took so long, Oscar. I know. Well, I've been with the zeitgeist movement since as soon as I could, pretty much, since The first week it came out, I joined in. I became a coordinator as soon as the positions came open, and I've been with the movement for a while, and I keep track of most things. And I haven't heard a really good idea in the whole 2.5 years I've been involved for a transition. I've heard some ideas, and they're vague, or they bring in caveats that weren't considered, and basically whether somebody has found a good transition or not, we all haven't arrived at that decision or that conclusion or that solution. And I ask, why is that? Why haven't we arrived at a decision together on the whole concept of transitioning to a resource-based economy, or Jacques Fresco's ideas? And I have to go back to the mathematical analogy. Maybe we're setting up the mathematical setup incorrectly. Okay, so real quick review, that if we have varying inputs, it's going to affect the solution. Remember the 1/4 versus the 0/4. We remember that. Also, remember that the order of the relationship of the inputs affects the solutions, and this can change our outcomes. So remember that. So what we really need to do here is start at the beginning and define our inputs. Now, we just did a section on defining what an emergent property is, so we know what it is we're trying to deal with. So let's define some other inputs. What is an economy? I ask people, what's an economy? And I get this blank face. It should be really fundamental. We should all have this definition ready to go. What is a monetary-based economy? What is a resource-based economy? What is the Venus Project? What is the Zeitgeist Movement? We should all be in agreement on our terms here. Okay, so let's define what an economy is. An economy is the human activity that involves the production, exchange, distribution, and consumption of goods and services. Now that's what it is. It's a human activity. An economy is an emergent property. It's a human activity that involves production, exchange, distribution, consumptions of goods and services. Okay, that's what an economy is. Now when we do production, exchange, distribution, and consumptions of goods and services based on if you have money or if you do not have money, this is what we call a monetary-based economy. We do the whole production, exchange, distribution, consumptions of goods and services based on money, monetary-based economy. Now, if we do all this production, exchange, distribution, consumptions of goods and services based on if the resources are available, now we have a resource-based economy. Now let me define that one more time. This is really important. The human activity that involves the production, exchange, distribution, consumptions of goods and services based on the availability of resources. This is a resource-based economy. Now note, on that definition of what a resource-based economy is, I didn't say anything about sustainability. I didn't say anything about circular cities or maglev trains or any of these concepts. We have to distinguish between what a resource-based economy is, an emergent property, and the Venus Project, the proposals, the aims and goals of what we're shooting for sustainability, and what we're going to do to remove stratification, war, and hunger and things. That's the Venus Project. It is not our definition of a resource-based economy. And it's going to be, as I'll point out in a few slides, is why it's important to make that distinction if we're going to make any kind of a transition. This is a really important slide. Setting up the problem, the order of inputs. We have to, if we're going to arrive at our solutions together, we have to define what the mathematical setup should be with our inputs, understanding the relationships they have to each other. People ask, how do we transition into a resource-based economy? And I don't think they're qualifying their terms correctly. I think what they really mean to ask is, how do we get from now to those wonderful ideas of sustainability and abundance? And if that's what they're asking, then we need to ask, how do we transition from a monetary-based economy to the Venus project? And that'd be a more appropriate question. And when people ask, how are we going to get there, it's sort of in a rhetorical fashion, as if they're suggesting that I don't see how we're going to transition there. And if you set up the mathematical equation that way of transitioning from a monetary-based economy to the Venus project, you're probably right that we can't transition like that, because the monetary-based economy is based on scarcity. How you get more money is if things are more scarce. So you have this sort of goal of bringing you the opposite direction of the Venus project, which is sustainability. And so when people ask, how we transition there, or they feel that they can't, if that's the mathematical setup, then you're right. We cannot transition directly that way because they are at opposite ends of each other, different goals, and they will be in opposition. So I propose we set up the mathematical problem in a different way. Now, in Zeitgeist Moving Forward, Peter Joseph points out this wonderful plan on this analogy of a second Earth. Like, what if we had a second Earth? What would we do? We would survey the land and see what we have available, and we'd set up all this and that. And there's a really detailed plan on how we go from a second Earth to this idea of the Venus project. So, why does he use a second Earth analogy? Well, in a second Earth, no one owns anything, and every resource available is just there for use. So, if you look at it that way, by definition, he just defined what a resource-based economy is. So, if you look at the proposition in the Zeitgeist Moving Forward, we have a wonderful transition on how to transition from a resource-based economy to the Venus project. So now, if we want to ask an appropriate question, let's finish the mathematical setup. How do we transition from a monetary-based economy to a resource-based economy? Because once we're at a resource-based economy and we have all this wonderful stuff to work with, then we can transition to the Venus project. So I think if we start thinking this way, with this mathematical setup, we might start arriving at some solutions together. It's sort of like clarifying the whole chicken or the egg poorly set up question. I think this is a more appropriate setup for our goals of what we're trying to achieve. So if you need to pause that and rewind, go ahead. That's a really important slide back there. So if you're moving on and you're ready to hear more information, how do we transition from a resource-based, monetary-based economy to a resource-based economy? Well, I propose that we have two economies already. We have a huge global monetary-based economy that we interact with the world. And we got a teeny, teeny, tiny resource-based economy that we interact with our friends and family. So in a monetary-based economy, that's a huge economy, a very strong economy. You can go anywhere on the globe almost and buy almost anything. You can buy, things from like little pieces of gum to people's ideology if you have enough money. So it's a very expansive economy there we have in a monetary-based economy in the world. But we have a very real but, very small micro economy, a resource-based economy with our friends and family. For example, my daughter, if she asks for a bowl of cereal with milk, I don't charge her for that. There's no money circulation in between my relationship. By definition of what emergent property is, the human activity between people is based on resources. If she asks for a bowl of cereal, I get a bowl, I get cereal, and I pour the milk and I hand it to her, based on the resources available. If I do not have milk, or I don't have clean bowls, or I don't have cereal, I'm like, sorry dude, I need to go get some milk or something, and then I'll give you some dry cereal if you want it. So there's no money interaction there. The monetary based economy hasn't infiltrated that relationship I have, that little sub-micro economy I have with my daughter. Same thing with my friends and family. I have an SUV that's pretty handy whenever you're moving, for like a different home or so, or moving apartments. They call me up, and if I'm available on Saturday to help them move, I'm like, yeah, sure. I don't charge them. Well, that'll be $57.35 for my time, I just do it based on the resources available. In this case, my time. If I don't, then I'm like, oh, we have to reschedule, or I just can't do it. But I don't charge them for money. So this is a resource-based economy. It's just interactions with each other based on the resources available, not on money available, like I do with my employers. I'm like, I'm not going to do a damn thing for them unless they pay me for it. So those are two different economies I have: my friends tab and my strangers tab. And what I propose is we shift that economic power towards a resource-based economy. Like slowly, we develop a network if we interact with each other, and we have two economies going simultaneously. Some of the things that we can transition into a resource-based economy, something renewable, is sort of like skills. I can give you my time, my skills, and these things I have resources, access to resource. I don't have timber or land or a smelting plant or something. So these sort of things, these issues deal with scarcity. I'm gonna have to use money. I have to pay my bills. I have to pay my student loans. You're not gonna do it. But if I know enough computer guys, I should never have to pay for my computer being repaired. They should do it. They should hook me up for free, right? We're all zeitgeisters, right? So let's shift that towards the resource-based economy. So hopefully we'll have, with a successful transition, a very strong interaction based a resource-based economy that we treat everybody in the human species sort of like friends and family, because in one way or another we're all related, we're all humans. We should be acting as one single family. If you view everybody as your uncle and aunt and cousins and stuff like that, like when I go to a restaurant, I pretend like whoever's serving me is like my old bud from high school, and I drop the whole label of like server and customer. It's just stupid. So I want to treat everybody like that. I can't do it immediately. I can't just give all my stuff to everybody, or I just like dilute myself to nothing. But we can ease into it, and hopefully we'll have a resource-based economy that's stronger than the need for a monetary-based economy, which is how we deal with real life, or sometimes perceived, even in this case, scarcity. So again, how do we transition out of anything? Well, here an example that came to my mind was the whole transition between VHSs to DVDs, or VCR to DVD players. It's a really cheesy example, real oversimplified, but this transition had everything going for it. So we can look, had built-in planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence going for it, and it still took about 10 years for it to transition. And we can see how a simple transition is, and kind of build on there how an actual transition would actually work. So with VHSs or VHS tapes, we used to see them everywhere. Like they were all over the video rental stores, or the places where you buy them, like I don't know, like some department store or whatever. And at some point, you'd have both DVDs and VHSs for sale, or if you went to like Blockbuster, you would see the DVDs on the outer wall, and you have the cassette players. The cassettes in the center and stuff. Those at some point you had both going. You even had combo DVD VCR players. So when we transition, there's a point where we have two things going at once, and this is what I'm relating on when we shift power from a monetary-based economy to the resource-based economy. And like when we transition out of anything, do we fully transition out of anything? Like when the United States was transitioning from the old $100 bills to the new $100 bills. I remember I came across a new one. It's like, oh, whoa, look, this is the new $100 bill. Look, it looks kind of cool, or it looks kind of goofy. And the majority of hundreds out there were the old type. And then there was a time period where we had both bills in frequency and everywhere. You'd have a mix if you had money, you would have both bills in your wallet. And then, sure enough, I see whenever I do see $100 bills, it's usually the new ones. But you never fully transition out of the old $100 bills. I'm sure there's still some old $100 bills in circulation. You can never truly transition out of it, just like you can never truly transition out of VHS cassettes or VCRs. There's still some people out there with, their Disney collection having old tapes. So understanding this is the concept of a mathematical asymptote, where we approach a certain value, but we never quite reach it. And this is what I'm thinking of when we transition to a resource-based economy and we transition to the Venus Project. We'll never fully phase out scarcity. It won't happen, You're naive if you think you can. I mean, I think we can drastically reduce it. We can drastically reduce violence. We can never phase out violence for peace. There's always going to be something. But can we skew it in the favor of peace, where violence is not as rare as it is now, where people are imprisoned in such a ridiculous rate compared to other countries? This is what I think we need to do when we consider a transition. So the transition period, to me, is an asymptote. The transition period to a resource-based economy and then transitioning from resource-based economy to the Venus Project is infinity. And just like Jacques Fresco says, there is no utopia. We never get there, it can get a lot better. So this is what I want to explain to you, that when we transition, we never transition fully, but we can definitely make an effect towards that goal. So I've heard some ideas for intermediate steps, or sort of the transition period and stuff like that, where what we can do is set up a test city, where we can show the world how sustainable living can exist and stuff like that. And the first response people say is, what if they blow it up, right? And based on the inputs they have available, that's a logical a solution to arrive at, if that's what they were working with, right? Well, understand that when you set up a test city, you're going to be an island that has to interact with the rest of the world that's involved in a monetary-based economy. So it's sort of like, instead of the individual interacting with the world with money, you're going to be like a corporation interacting with the economy. You still have to interact, and you're not eliminating the need for money. You're just sort of like taking care of one little area of sustainability. Anyway, so as far as the whole responses are like, well, what if you blow up this, or what if you get some kind of a malicious attack? I like to make the example of, again, I'm a biologist, as microbial invasions or cancerous invasions. With a bacteria that enters your body doesn't recognize it as yourself, so it starts an immune inflammation response, and it sends in all this these biological tactics to deal with the invasion or the infection, and it gets attacked because it's not recognized itself. Whereas most cases of cancer, it is a very personal disease. It is you converting into something else, and your immune system doesn't detect it. And in most cases, your immunity doesn't attack the cancer because it doesn't recognize it as anything wrong, or at least as anything different. So making that analogy, I feel that if we get attacked by some malicious group or anything like that, then we're not transitioning from the inside out. We're going from the outside in, and we need to change that. So I propose that we transition to a resource-based economy from within, as I'm going to next. Another example of why I don't like these intermediate steps of sort of like the transition period or so, as like it's some temporary state. I think of like ideas of transitioning from capitalism to socialism to communism, and you get into this transition period, and it gives opportunity that you didn't consider, or just you can't consider. Just things happen, and it just fails on you, and you never really achieve that ultimate state. Well, that's one problem I don't like with the intermediate steps. But the second problem I don't like with intermediate steps is, how do you transition to the transition period, right? How do you transition out of the transition period into a resource-based economy? well, whatever information you supply me with there, I'm going to propose that we just go ahead and go for the money and transition to a resource-based economy, right? Because the same concepts of people understanding and accepting and, you know, shifting consciousness, well, all that can be applied to the resource-based economy transition and just cut out the middleman, so to speak. So ultimately, I say that we have resource-based economies all over, but we're all separated from each other because we're, you know, in essence, strangers to everybody. And it isn't until you meet friends and stuff like that, you start hooking people up. Like, hey, you're looking for a job? Well, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy who can hook you up with a job. You know, this sort of network is what we need to start establishing and strengthening our resource-based economy. I propose that we move in a two-dimensional fashion where we start incorporating more people. You know, like if I'm by myself here in Fort Worth, Texas, and somebody else is, you know, somewhere in New York, what I have to offer isn't going to be very useful. So you have to have a resource-based economy where it's kind of practical and dealing with people around me. So the more people I involve, the stronger my network will be. Eventually, the things that can be included, which at first will be absolutely pathetic, you know, you'd be like, oh, I can offer you my time, and, you know, it's not pathetic, but pathetic compared to like, oh, I can offer you a jet or something substantial like that is what I mean. But the more people you get, the more diversity of things that can be contributed to the resource-based economy, and we'll start getting more stuff. You know, like right now, I can offer my time, I can offer my presentation pretend ability, and also, you know, I have skills too. You know, apart from biology, I know how to work on air conditioning, and anyone around me that, you know, was in driving distance should never have to pay for air conditioning repairs, because I should be able to hook them up. Eventually, we'll start incorporating more people who can offer more resources that are in high demand. Like, let's say we pull in a doctor or something who can hook you up with simple prescriptions, right? You know, you got to pay for the antibiotics yourself, but he'll write you the prescription because, you know, you're RBE friendly, right? You know, we start off slow, you know, humble, but we start getting more and more people. And as we get more and more people, we start getting more and more stuff. We start growing or strengthening our resource-based economy three-dimensionally as well. So as we start setting up these cells of a resource-based economy within, like, sort of regional chapters in our movement, I feel that we can start working within our chapters with each other. You know, like if one city chapter is close to another, and you have some zeitgeist stuff available to drive over there. Hey, we'll let you borrow this banner. You know, I was going there anyway. We started expanding our network. You know, with a lecture team. Hey, I got a presentation I can share with you over there. You know, stuff like just anything we can. We start expanding our network as a movement. And this is how we're going to start transitioning into a resource-based economy. So ultimately, the idea is we have so many networks that we're all connected, and we can use some sort of like information site, you know, where it hooks you up, sort of like a dating site of proximity and interest, and or like a for sale Craigslist kind of thing. You know, you post what you have to offer, or even all three, that in sort of like a Facebook format. I don't know, that's beyond the scope of this presentation. But the idea is we come with some way to survey the resources available, and we start, you know, making our way into these projects of sustainability. How we come up with the resources available to set up, you know, a test city if you wanted to, and not have to pay for it or not have to fundraise and stuff like that, if we can get enough people with enough diverse things to offer. So this is what I propose to transition to resource-based economy, and eventually start transitioning to Venus Project, is that we have to do this from within. We can't do it externally. We can't move to an island and separate ourselves from the world. We have to change from within. You can't change the world. You can only change yourself. And in that way, you are changing that part of the world. And this is what we need to do. We need to reach people on a personal level, get them to change, get them to want to change over from this emergent property, make it stop functioning, and transition to another emergent property that will lead to sustainability. And I guess that's about it. This is the short version again. If you want to hear the longer version, which, if you can imagine, there are two longer versions of this, and it's really epic, and I'm real proud of it. But that's beyond the scope of this. I would like to thank the coordinators in my Texas State chapter that really helped with this, providing images and input and sort of editing my ideas and stuff like that. So yeah, that's about it. Again, we are the problem, we are the solution. Again, the point of this this little presentation is sort of to pitch the idea. Hopefully, I get some good input and fix the things that are lacking in my logic. I'm all about peer review. I'd like to make a higher level production of this and make it presentable for the public. But yeah, just hit me up on oscar.texas@thezeitgeistmovement.com, or look me up on Facebook, Oskar Gonzalez. I'm sure many of you are already my Facebook friend, and if not, just click a button. And hopefully we'll get started on this idea. Whether you agree with it or not, hopefully you're thinking about it now, and if you are so, then I've reached one of my objectives. And I thank you for your time.